Thank you for choosing to watch this video. I'll be tying a simple jig nymph, sort of a variation on the Devan Olsen's Blowtorch. Start by mounting your bead on the hook. Here I'm using a full mil copper tungsten bead in 3.2mm on a size 18 jig force hook. Once you've got the hook mounted, catch on your tying thread. For this fly I'm using some of Semperfli's classic waxed thread in Claret, size 12 knot. Once you've got your thread on, trim off the waste end. Well, we'll need to build some bulk up behind the bead to hold it in place. We don't want the tail end of the fly to be too bulky. So I'll catch in the tail material here, try and slot it into the bead to try and stabilise that as much as possible as well. The tail on this fly is some Glo-Brite Floss in number 7 orange. So make sure the floss tail is sitting neatly on top of the hook and bind down to where you want the body to end. And we'll just bring the thread back up, tidying up the underbody as we go. I'm not completely happy with the angle of the hook and the vise here, so I'm just going to adjust it quickly. And reset it and check the hook hold this time. Trim the tail to length, it doesn't need to be too long, just a little bit beyond the bend of the hook. The body on this fly is some of Fooling Mill's Nymph-Rap in translucent black. This is the micro 2mm size. So there's not a huge difference between the two sides of the material, but just have a look and make sure you know which side you want to be facing outward. Trim a blunt point into the material, and then as you tie it in you can really stretch this to help keep the tail end of the fly as thin as possible. Now I've not let that material slip through my fingers, so you can see how far I've stretched it, and there's no risk of it breaking. Once you've got it tied in, tidy up the underbody, making sure you're happy with the profile and there's enough bulk to hold the bead in place. You don't want to go too heavy, but I do want to create a nice taper in the body. You can also achieve this by adjusting the tension on the Nymph-Rap as you form the body. Once you're happy with that, it's time to wrap the body. Take a little time with the first wrap to make sure the material's sitting nicely and isn't twisted or wrapping the way you don't want it. Wrap the body in overlapping turns to give a nice segmented effect. You might want to take your time, make sure you get the spacing on the segmentation the way you like it. This material is really nice as it has the translucence lets the thread colour show through. This could have more impact with a brighter coloured thread. Once you're happy with the body, catch in with a few wraps of thread, keeping the thread under tension so that it doesn't slip, and lock it in with a few turns. You probably need one wrap more than you think for the body just to make sure you've got proper coverage and the last segment looks right. Next step is to dub a small colour of using Fooling Mill's tactical Microflash dub in Peacock. And this is a very sparse little colour, you don't need a lot of dubbing for this. I've maybe gone slightly too sparse on this one, so I'll take it back and add a little bit more dubbing. Really like this flashy dubbing, it comes in a really nice staple length, it's great for a wide variety of flies and perfect for nymphs. That should be plenty. Then I want to add a collar of CDC. I'll use some of Fooling Mill's natural CDC for this one. First I've got to split the thread. This can be a fiddly operation, and you can do it on a fingernail and using a dubbing needle. But here I'm using a tool from Smyrn that I recently bought. I'm still getting to grips with it, but it does seem to be quite a nice tool. I'd forgotten to prep my CDC, so I'm putting it into the Swiss CDC tools clamp and trimming off the waste end. Once I've got the CDC prepped, I'll come back to split the thread. I'm just flattening it out in the tool and trying to catch the thread with the tip. It does work quite nicely, but I dropped the split. There we go. So I'm just holding the split thread open with my finger, and I'll insert the clamp so that the threads are on almost the body of the clamp. Then I can pull the thread tight and drop it off onto the CDC fibres. You don't need a lot for this collar, you don't want to go too heavy. So once I've got them a couple of turns on the thread to hold the CDC in place, I might pull out a few of the strands at the bottom, just to make sure I'm not going to put too much of a collar on. Once you're happy with the CDC and the split thread, twist it up so that everything's held in securely, and then wind it as you would a hackle, folding the barbs back so they sit nicely. For this style of fly, especially with the CDC collar, I like to put my varnish or resin onto the thread before I whip finish. I find this helps me avoid clogging up the CDC too much with the resin or the varnish. So here I'm using some of Raidsap's thin, clear UV resin. You'll notice I've trimmed down the brush on the applicator to make it neater for applying to smaller heads. You don't need a lot of resin on here, you don't want a lot, so you don't mess up the materials. Then just throw on your 3-turn whip finish, which should be plenty. Pull the thread tight, make sure it's locked in, and then I'll set the resin with the torch before I trim away the thread. And that's the tying done. Trim away your thread, and then just check that you're happy with where everything's sitting and the collar. You might want to tweak away some of the longer fibres that are a bit out there. That's it, finished. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please like it, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel to be kept up to date with future videos. If there's any patterns you'd like to see me tie, please don't hesitate to drop a note in the comments.